India-China resume patrolling along LAC.
Agreement has been arrived at on patrolling arrangements along the line of actual control in the India-China border areas, leading to disengagement and a resolution of the issues.
After 4 years of border confrontation, India-China to put Galwan clash behind. India tames the dragon. That is our top focus on 5 Live.
A day before the BRICS Summit, where there's going to be a possible meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping, a big possible breakthrough from Ladakh, the site of the world's biggest military standoff for the last 4.5 years and counting. We'll be reporting the facts to you right here on 5 Live. Thanks as always for being with me. I'm Shiv. These are the headlines first. Big storm over Chief Justice of India's divine intervention for Ram Mandir remark. Congress hits out. Samajwadi Party Neta uses the C word, backtracks amidst contempt charge heat. Spurt of bomb threats plague India's carriers. Security beefed up across airports and flights. Centre to make hoax calls a cognizable offence.
Even though there are hoax threats, we can't take the situation non-seriously. Everything is important for us. Now the life of a passenger is important, the security situation is important, so the protocol is important for us.
7 killed in terror attack in Jammu and Kashmir's Gandarbal on Sunday night. NIA likely to take over the probe. Sources say Lashkar-e-Taiba offshoot TRF is behind the attack. More babies clamour in the south. Tamil Nadu Chief Minister M.K. Stalin backs Andhra Chief Minister Chandrababu Naidu's more than 2 babies per family call. Says it will help tackle aging demography and poll eligibility. Recalled Indian High Commissioner to Canada Sanjay Verma speaks out for the first time, says India has no role in Nijjar's killing, claims Canada is yet to offer any proof, alleges that Trudeau's government has been using Khalistani terrorists as assets against India.
Anything which is acceptable in the Canadian court of law would largely also be acceptable in the Indian court of law, and therefore that evidence will work. Unfortunately, we have not got anything from any Canadian official which can lead us to a better spot.
Now, ahead of the big BRICS Summit in Russia, a breakthrough of the kind no one was expecting at this time. India and China have now formally agreed on a further normalization of military relations along the restive line of actual control in eastern Ladakh. The two sides, according to the Indian government today, have agreed on patrolling arrangements along the line of actual control, which is where the world's biggest military standoff began following clashes in 2020. This now may lead to a full disengagement of the military at the India-China frontier in eastern Ladakh. This is very, very big, but we are still awaiting the details and therefore reporting this development with a note of caution. The development comes today following recent negotiations between officials of both India and China. Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri at a press conference earlier today said that Indian and Chinese negotiators have been in contact over the past few weeks to resolve the remaining issues along the LAC in Ladakh. Relations between the two neighbors have been tense, even warlike, since the Galwan Valley clash in June 2020, which resulted in the deaths of 20 Indian soldiers and a larger number, but unspecified number, of Chinese soldiers. Ever since then, disengagement or troop pullback has taken place in some of the friction points, notably Galwan, the Pangong Lake, both sides of the Pangong Lake, and the Gogra Hot Springs area. But two separate sticking points in eastern Ladakh have continued to remain stubborn friction points. That is the Depsang and Demchok areas of northern and southern Ladakh. Here's what the Foreign Secretary has just said.
Over the last several weeks, Indian and Chinese diplomatic and military negotiators have been in close contact with each other in a variety of forums. And as a result of these discussions, agreement has been arrived at on patrolling arrangements along the line of actual control in the India-China border areas, leading to disengagement and a resolution of the issues. This is a multilateral event, though of course there is always a provision for bilateral meetings on the sidelines. We are currently looking into the overall program of the Prime Minister. There are a number of requests for bilateral meetings, and we will update you on the bilaterals as they evolve as soon as feasible.
You spoke about patrolling resuming. Now, there were two friction points that existed before the Galwan problem. And these were cases where patrolling was blocked. So, when you say that patrolling has resumed, can we assume that these two friction points, the problems there, because both sides were blocking the patrolling, the Chinese did that first, then India did it. Those problems have been eliminated.
So let me say it again. An agreement has been reached on patrolling arrangements along the line of actual control in the India-China border areas. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Clearly is a big day. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has also spoken on this big breakthrough. Dr. Jaishankar, the External Affairs Minister, has just said, we have reached an understanding with China, will return to pre-2020 patrolling. Jaishankar says frictions happen between large countries, but this is a major breakthrough, and I'm going to try and understand it just a little bit from the best team of reporters decoding a complex issue just as it breaks. Joining me live now, Gaurav Sawant is live with us from Russia. He's there to cover the BRICS Summit. Remember, all eyes are on that summit, especially with this breakthrough happening right before a day when the Indian and Chinese leadership could possibly hold a bilateral meeting. Shivani Sharma is our defense correspondent. Shashank Mattu tracks the External Affairs Ministry for us. Gaurav, quickly coming to you first. And Gaurav is one of the few journalists who's actually visited all of these places in eastern Ladakh that the Foreign Secretary is talking about. Gaurav, the details have been left out, but very, very promising words used by Vikram Misri, the Foreign Secretary, when he says a resolution, an agreement has been reached between both sides where patrolling will continue. Can you explain to us your understanding of what the Foreign Secretary meant?
Shiv, it's a very, very major development 4 years after the India-China standoff in eastern Ladakh. If patrolling is resuming, and what the External Affairs Minister said, Dr. S. Jaishankar, when he said that we are returning to a pre-2020 situation, that means that whatever happened when the two Chinese divisions, they amassed very close to the friction points, and then they came, across the line of actual control, and there was a confrontation where the two armies were eyeball to eyeball. Multiple friction points, as you and I have reported very extensively, whether it was at Pengongso or at the Chota Kailash Hills, where India was dominating the Chinese Moldo garrison. So those friction points had been addressed right then. However, post Galwan, the situation remained very, very tense, especially at Depsang in the north, the northern part of eastern Ladakh, and Demchok at the southern part of eastern Ladakh. And the Chinese often argued that this predates the 2020 standoff. The Chinese had all along claimed that the situation had been sorted out earlier, but India insisted that Depsang and Demchok also needed to be addressed, which means when the Chinese, they were blocking our patrolling to various patrol points at the Raki Nala, at the Y junction, not permitting us to go up to, PP 12, 13, 14 initially, and that part. And of course, in southern Ladakh, all of that apparently have been sorted out as per the agreement What happens on ground, we shall have to wait when the next patrol goes. And I believe the agreement is that the two sides will inform each other when they patrol those areas, go up to their respective claim lines. So this is not a resolution, it's just resumption of a pre-2020 situation, Shiv.
And considering how difficult it has been to reach this point, even a resumption sounds like a major milestone and a major breakthrough. Before I go, Gaurav, stay with me. Before I go to Shivani and Shashank, let's just, for our viewers, show you or remind you where those friction points really are in eastern Ladakh. It's been 4.5 years, but this is how it all really began. The mainstay of this standoff is happening in eastern Ladakh, where the Depsang is the northernmost area. That is an old legacy issue. It didn't begin in 2020. It actually began way earlier under the previous government. Hot Springs, Galwan, and Pangong So. Those are the three friction points that erupted during the 2020 standoff, which, as Gaurav explained, was triggered by a huge Chinese deployment in the Aksai Chin area. And then there's Demchok in the southern part of Ladakh. So apart from the middle three, Demchok and Depsang have been legacy issues which predate 2020 and go back a long way. The other parts of the India-China frontier are not seeing standoff situations right now, so those are not really a problem, even though China has tried to escalate tensions in places like Sikkim and Arunachal Pradesh. Let me go across now to Shivani Sharma, defense correspondent, for more. Shivani, the foreign secretary didn't explicitly mention Depsang and Demchok, but he did, in response to a question from a reporter at that press conference, basically say, yes, we're talking about resumption of patrolling in those friction areas. Is there a confirmation and clarity on that? The reason I ask is, and you know this better than anyone, Shivani, because the friction points, which are Galwan, Gogra, Hot Springs, and Pangong, the disengagement has happened. So, a resumption of patrolling there is conceivable at this point of time. But if the government is talking about an agreement of resumption of patrolling and normalization in Demchok and Depsang, that makes this perhaps the biggest story of the year.
Shiv, we are trying to decode from whatever MEA's at a briefing was being told by the Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri, and he has mentioned leading to disengagement. That means he's talking about some places from where disengagement has not happened. And we know that after 2020, disengagement has already taken place from Galwan, from north and south of Pangong So, from Hot Springs, Gogra, that we say PP15 and PP17A also. So the two places from where the disengagement was not happening, and they remain to be one of the major traditional friction points, and for which the talks were already happening, the rounds of discussion. We know that 21 rounds of co-commander level talks have already happened. There have been 2 WMCC meetings that happened in last 3 months. That means that something is going to unfold. Everybody was getting those indications from the MOD and also from the MEA that something big is going to happen. But today, when he announced, the Foreign Secretary announced that agreement has been reached on the resumption of patrolling from the remaining friction points leading to disengagement. So it's very much readable from there, Shiv, that he's talking about these 2 friction points, though he did not name these friction points, which are Depsang Plains and Demchok. But the talks have been around these 2 friction points, because these are the points where maximum tensions have been seen after Galwan and still remain. And maximum deployment of forces, not only from India, but also from China at these friction points is being seen. So
let me just bring, Shivani, hold on for a second. Let me just bring Gaurav in for a perspective on whether this announcement, Gaurav, does it clear the decks? I mean, it wouldn't be, I wouldn't be going out on a limb to see this announcement as having been timed just before the BRICS Summit. But what's happening at your end in Russia? Does this mean or increase the possibility of a bilateral, India-China bilateral?
It's on the cards very clearly, Shiv. Of course, I tried to pry out some information from India's ambassador to Russia. When I just interviewed him a short while back, Ambassador Vinay Kumar, while he was extremely forthcoming, on a bilateral with the Russian President Vladimir Putin, they've been extremely, tight-lipped about what else and who else. Chinese President Xi Jinping, we are told, remember when Wang Yi, the Chinese foreign minister and state secretary, had visited India, and on multiple other occasions when he's engaged with Dr. S. Jaishankar, India's external affairs minister, they've been very keen for resumption of dialogue. They've been very keen on resumption of India-China ties, but India has been very clear. Ties can be normalized only when the situation along the line of actual control between India and Tibet, or the India-China LAC, once they are normalized. You cannot have ties growing in other areas while there's friction at the borders, and we have 50,000 troops on the Indian side and 50,000 troops deployed on the Chinese side. So we do see a slight change in the Chinese stance in the past several months. They've been far more conciliatory, but does it translate into action on ground, Shiv? As you and I and our team has been reported extensively, the Chinese are very sweet. So you don't go by what they say, you go by what they do. And if they actually disengage from these grounds, and Shiv, as you well know, it's a three-step process. You disengage, you de-escalate, and then you de-induct. The taste of the pudding, whether the ties are improving, lies in de-induction of those 50,000 troops. That will take a long time to happen. But this, if it's actually happening on ground, is a very crucial first step. Then de-escalation, and then de-induction. Should that happen, India-China ties are then once again on an even keel.
In a few minutes from now, I'm going to play out Gaurav's full exclusive conversation with India's ambassador to Moscow, Vinay Kumar. Gaurav, but I'm going to let you go for the moment because I know you're on the road and you're headed towards the BRICS venue, so we'll catch up with you there. But remember, when Gaurav says that things have been conciliatory between China and India for the last few weeks, remember the phrase that China only respects strength. So what does it tell you about the way in which India has been handling all of this? Before I go to Shashank Mattu, my colleague, quickly want to tell our viewers once again also about the implications of a truce on the line of actual control. Let's assume that this is the biggest possible breakthrough and this is going to lead towards normalization on the line of actual control. It means that India and China have arrived at a patrolling arrangement where troops from both sides can continue what they used to do, which was mutual patrolling of the frontier areas of Ladakh. Disengagement on a disputed Himalayan frontier, which has been the reason for a warlike situation for 4 years and counting. It could be a resolution of a conflict that began in 2020 and has resulted in both countries coming very close to open hostilities on a number of occasions, including in Galwan. And this could also clear the decks for the possible return to a pre-2020 LAC status quo, which has been India's demand all this while. I want to bring in Shashank for a perspective on this. Shashank, you've had the Foreign Secretary speak. You've had Dr. S. Jaishankar also speak at an event where he talked about how this is a very, very good development, forward movement. But the only thing about China that one needs to be cautious about is, is whether these are cosmetic steps forward or meaningful, substantive breakthroughs as far as some of the most stubborn issues are concerned in Ladakh. Also, the fact that there will be more meetings going forward. What are you hearing from the External Affairs Ministry, Shashank?
You're absolutely right. I think the tone is one of cautious optimism. As you rightly mentioned, there are going to be meetings happening over the next couple of months. Of course, winter will then set in. There will be, of course, reductions in troop levels as well. And I think the two sides will continue to engage on hopefully what will look like more complete disengagement along the LAC. But what we're hearing really from the MEA is some level of cautious optimism. You, of course, had the External Affairs Minister. He spoke very recently talking about how, he was asked about what this means for trade and investment ties and so on and so forth. And he said, look, the understanding has just been reached today. There is a lot of work to be done on this front. So we will continue to look at that. But absolutely, he did not make any bones about it. He said that, look, this will be a positive development. It hopefully allows us a basis for going back to what things used to look like with our northern neighbors. So that is a confrontation that India has wanted to resolve for some time now. So if you're asking for what the mood is within the MEA, it is one of cautious optimism. Of course, we'll have to see about a meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Xi Jinping of China, where presumably some of the reporting or some of the conversations that I have seen have been about, look, what we might see is some disengagement and some resumption of patrolling, and then a proper sort of political impetus or political push behind a decision like this in terms of disengagement, and then de-escalation will have to be taken at a bilateral meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping that will take place on the sidelines of the BRICS Summit. So that is what all eyes are going to be on. The two leaders giving a political push to both their systems and their two militaries to say, hey, let's fix this. Let's go back to how things used to be.
Shivani, one final question to you. This makes it clear that, while the military engagement continues at the core level in Chushul and in Ladakh, etc., the final solution to what's going to happen is going to have to be diplomatic. That has been the stand for at least 2 years now. And it is very clear now that it is finally the foreign offices and the president's office and the prime minister's office that will lead to this resolution now.
Certainly, Shiv, a very big hint that was given was a delay in the co-commander level military talks because, after February 2024, there have been no co-commander military talks. That was the last round of talk that we had. That was the 21st round of talk, and we were waiting for the 22nd round of talk. And significantly, this was the longest delay in between two rounds of talks. So that was a clear hint that diplomatically the matter is being handled now. And on the local level, the commanders of both the countries, they were meeting, the routine calls and the routine meetings were taking place. But the co-commander level talk was not happening, and it's been more than 8 months now. So the clear hint was that on the diplomatic level, the Ministry of External Affairs is dealing with the situation. It's holding the WMCC meetings that happened recently. Also, 2 rounds of these meetings happened. That was giving an indication that Ministry of External Affairs is handling the situation. They are discussing the issue. And that's what we heard today from the Foreign Secretary, too, that there were multiple discussions that were taking place on the MEA's level. Because when you used to go and meet the MOD officers, too, they used to say that MEA will be informing very soon what's happening there. That means that the resolution that the MEA is talking about is a result of these discussions at the diplomatic level.
It's very, very important. And, what happens at the BRICS, the possibility of a handshake by the Prime Minister and the Chinese President is a big one. They have to have something to show for it, to justify in many ways the bilateral. And believe me, trade aside, there is no bigger issue on the table between India and China than the festering border issue, especially in eastern Ladakh. So if that's been forget about resolved, but if there's been even a tiny step forward in terms of the resumption of patrolling, believe me, it's the biggest possible a news break that we can bring to you. Shivani and Shashank, thanks very much for helping our viewers understand a complex story that is still shape-shifting. Many things can change between today and tomorrow, but we will keep you posted. Remember, India Today's Gaurav Sawant is in Russia. In fact, he caught up with India's ambassador to Moscow, one of the key players in what is taking place between India, Russia and China at this time. Here's a look at what the ambassador Vinay Kumar said.
With me is India's ambassador to Russia, Ambassador Vinay Kumar. Ambassador, welcome on India Today. Ambassador, what do we expect from the Prime Minister's visit? What's top on his agenda?
The Prime Minister's visit is taking place for participation in the 16th BRICS Summit. And there are a number of issues that BRICS is handling today. Economic development, furthering economic cooperation between the member states, in cooperation for reforming the global institutions, including the Security Council, giving greater voice to the global south, handling climate change. These are some of the most prominent issues that the leaders are expected to discuss during the summit.
Now, when the Prime Minister comes, just before that, there's a big announcement that's been made by India about a roadmap for disengagement at the line of actual control between India and China. The Foreign Secretary has announced it a short while back. Is there a bilateral with the Chinese President Xi Jinping scheduled on the sidelines or being planned, sir?
At this stage, I have nothing to say on that.
So you think we're moving on a resolution on multiple fronts, whether it's the LAC or conflict in other parts of the world or Russia-Ukraine conflict. So this BRICS summit becomes very crucial as there's a lot of conflict resolution that is on the agenda?
Well, I won't be able to say or put it that way, but yes, BRICS being a gathering of such important countries certainly contributes towards global prosperity, development, and cooperation.
So for speaking to us here on India Today, many thanks.
Well, from India, China, Russia to India, Canada, where it's a very, very different story because it's been a week now since Trudeau began his fresh war against India. And amidst this India-Canada showdown, the recalled Indian ambassador, High Commissioner to Canada, Sanjay Verma, a man who was dangerously accused of being part of a conspiracy in Canada, has spoken out for the first time on Canadian media. Sanjay Verma, the Indian High Commissioner to Canada, who was recalled last week over the Niger killing last year, has exposed how the Trudeau government has provided zero evidence so far. Watch how he completely demolishes Team Trudeau.
Khalistani extremists are being encouraged all the time.
Indian High Commissioner to Canada, who was recalled last week, hits out after being named a person of interest in the murder of pro-Khalistani terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Sanjay Verma, in his first interview, after Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Canadian police made the shocking allegations, claimed Ottawa has provided zero evidence to India or any link to Nijjar's killing.
There are a couple of things. We needed to see some evidence on the basis of which we can converse with our Canadian counterparts. Unfortunately, not a shred of evidence has been shared with us. Any evidence which is shared has to be legally acceptable. We are a country of rule of law.
Verma, in the interview to CTV, claimed that many Khalistani separatists are assets of the Trudeau government.
Khalistani extremists are being encouraged all the time. I also know, again, this is my allegation, I'm not giving you any evidence on that. I also know that some of these Khalistani extremists and terrorists are deep assets of CSIS. Same thing which Trudeau did. Yes.
Yeah, but why the envoy questioned why there has been no judicial action taken if there was evidence of his role.
You yourself are a person of interest in the murder of Hardeep Nijjar. Did you have anything to do with his murder?
Nothing at all. No evidence presented, politically motivated, and more or less, if Mr. Trudeau or his colleagues know about it, is it not a crime not to file a charge sheet? Is it not a crime not to go the judicial process?
Verma accused Trudeau of damning Indo-Canadian ties to appease pro-Khalistani voices in Canada.
Do we want to know what pro-Khalistani elements in Canada are doing? Yes, we do. That's my national interest. That's my core concern with Canada, which is trying to tore up Indian territory. So if the Canadian politicians are so novice that they want me not to know what my enemies are doing here, I'm sorry, then they don't know what the international relation is all about.
Canada and India. Verma's accusations comes days after Trudeau claimed that there is evidence of Indian link to Nijjar's murder.
Law enforcement and intelligence officials began pursuing credible allegations that agents of the government of India were directly involved in the killing of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, on Canadian soil. We responded.
Trudeau's allegations sparked a fresh round of diplomatic standoff between India and Canada that saw the two countries expel diplomats and downgrade ties. The face-off could worsen in the coming months as Canada gets closer to national elections next year. Bureau Report, India Today.
Pro-Khalistan terrorist and US citizen Gurpatwant Singh Pannu has issued another threat to Air India flights, warning passengers not to fly on Air India flights from November 1st to November 19th. Why has he chosen those dates, and who is he to warn people not to fly Air India? He asserted that an attack could take place on an Air India flight during those specified dates. Here's a report. It's the second time he's done it. No action has been taken against him by the US government.
Pro-Khalistani separatist Gurpatwant Singh Pannu has issued another threat to India. This time, he has warned passengers not to fly on Air India flights from November 1st to 19th. He claimed that an attack could take place on an Air India flight during the specified dates, which coincide with the 40th anniversary of what he called the Sikh genocide. The founder of Sikhs for Justice, who holds dual citizenship in Canada and the US, had issued a similar threat around the same time last year. Pannu's fresh threat comes amid several airlines in India receiving multiple threat calls about potential bombings, all of which turned out to be hoaxes. It also comes at a time when India and Canada are engaged in a murky diplomatic row following Canada's allegations of India targeting Khalistani elements in the country. In November 2023, Pannu released a video claiming that Delhi's Indira Gandhi International Airport would be renamed and would remain closed on November 19th, warning people against flying on Air India that day. The National Investigation Agency charged him with criminal conspiracy, promoting enmity between different groups on the grounds of religion, and various offences under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, UAPA. In December last year, Pannu threatened to attack the parliament on or before December 13th, following reports of an alleged foil plot to kill him. December 13 marks the anniversary of the terrorist attack on the parliament in 2001. Pannu has been designated a terrorist by the Ministry of Home Affairs since July 2020 on charges of sedition and secessionism. India banned Sikhs for Justice as an unlawful association for engaging in anti-national and subversive activities. Bureau Report, India Today.
And amidst the continuing worsening of relations between India and Canada, one astonishing aspect of the story, viewer, has been completely missed. I wonder why. In the middle of an increasingly aggressive war of claims and counterclaims, one aspect has for some reason been ignored completely, even by the media, until now. Because honestly, viewer, India can sit here forever and point a finger at Canada, but the truth I'm about to tell you could and should change everything. So pay very close attention to what I'm about to tell you. The terrorist bombing of Kanishka Air India Flight 182 on June the 23rd, 1985 remains one of the deadliest terrorist attacks in aviation history. The plane en route from Montreal in Canada to Delhi, India, exploded mid-air off the coast of Ireland, killing all 329 passengers and crew members, including 268 Canadian citizens. Two major investigations in Canada indicted ISI-backed pro-Khalistan Canadian terrorists, Canadian citizens, as the masterminds behind this bombing. But what Canada doesn't want you to know is that Canadian intelligence itself was involved in this conspiracy. I bet you didn't know that. You don't have to believe me either, because obviously I'm guilty of foreign interference as per a new government report. But you would believe documents released by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, wouldn't you? The country's public broadcaster, CBC, reported in May 2003 that Canadian Security and Intelligence Service, or CSIS, had an agent in the plot to bomb the Kanishka Air India flight, and that it pulled out this agent at the last minute so he wouldn't be implicated. His name was Surjan Singh Gill, who was, according to official Canadian documents, reported by Canada's public broadcaster in 2003, not my opinion, Canada's opinion. He was pulled out at the last minute because his Canadian intelligence handlers felt that things are happening and you can't be seen as part of that. Surjan Singh Gill was pulled out days before the Kanishka Air India bombing. Surjan Singh Gill was smuggled out of Canada to the UK, where he promptly disappeared, never to be seen again. Nobody knows where he is or even if he's alive. In other words, Canadian intelligence, an arm of the Canadian government, were aware of the Kanishka bombing plot, but either chose not to stop it or simply got out of the way so it could proceed. What the Canadian police documents, the RCMP documents, basically say, therefore, is that the Canadian government made a covert decision to protect a sensitive source at the cost of 329 lives, including 268 Canadian citizens who lost their lives in that Kanishka bombing. The same CBC public broadcaster report that reveals the RCMP documents nailing Canadian intelligence in the Kanishka plot also say that the Canadian Intelligence Agency destroyed hundreds of wiretaps relating to the Air India investigation subsequently, something that the Crown conceded in court was unacceptable negligence. Negligence? Is this negligence that an intelligence agency of Canada, nailed by its own government to have been embedded in the Kanishka bombing plot, could destroy huge amounts of specific evidence owing to negligence? Wasn't it rather just the opposite of negligence, viewer? A very specific and deliberate destruction of evidence in order to shield the Canadian state's direct involvement in one of the world's worst terrorist attacks. But the destruction of that evidence had set the ball rolling towards what would become a few years later a national campaign to let the Canadian government and Canadian intelligence off the hook and whitewash Canadian government involvement with pro-Khalistani terrorists in the Kanishka bombing plot. In 2010, the John C. Major Investigative Committee shockingly concluded that it was a, and I quote, cascading series of errors by Crown ministries, the RCMP, and the Canadian intelligence that allowed the terrorist attack to take place. In other words, not commission, but omission. Not deliberate action, but negligence. Not pulling the trigger, but sleeping at the wheel. Not you did a bad thing, but you weren't doing your job to stop that bad thing. That is how poisoned Canadian politics and state morality in Canada is by pro-Khalistan terrorists. And if you think that was bad, try this on for size, viewer. Ever since Justin Trudeau declared a diplomatic war on India over the killing of terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar last year, pro-Khalistan elements in Trudeau's Liberal Party have been emboldened enough by this national platform to actually call for a revisiting of the Kanishka bombing case. Can you believe that? A case in which two separate Canadian investigations have managed to indict Canadian pro-Khalistan terrorists and groups. In August this year, Trudeau's party colleague, a shameless man called Sukh Dhaliwal, that's him on your screen, sponsored a petition calling for a new investigation into the Kanishka Air India bombing. It takes no great intelligence to see that this is a brazen, bloodless attempt to shift the blame away from pro-Khalistani terrorists and somehow blame someone else, presumably the Indian government or RAW or the Indian Intelligence Bureau, for bombing Air India Kanishka. As Canadian politicians balk at how the Indian media has been covering this story and how Trudeau's government has shamefully attempted to label Indian journalism as foreign interference, the Canadian public should know that this is what Justin Trudeau's legacy really is. Canadian civil society and Canadian media have been helpless in the face of the rampant infestation of the country's political and intelligence system by terrorists and gangsters owing allegiance to a fantasy cause kept alive by Pakistan in order to maintain security leverage against India. The Canadian public ought to know that the Canadian government has allowed Canada's global reputation to be sullied, possibly irrevocably, by surrendering its institutions and the levers of power to gun runners, drug traffickers, and murderers, most of whom are wanted, with requests for extradition from the world's largest democracy. The blood of 329 victims, including 268 Canadian citizens, would boil if it knew that 4 decades later, the Trudeau government that had sworn to protect citizens is waging a war to protect those that spilt that very same blood. Because this is now the unshakable truth, viewer. By making the appeasement of terrorists state policy and in fact state structure, the Canadian state can no longer be seen as separate from these terrorists on its soil. We're taking a very quick break. On the other side, a big spurt in bomb threats plaguing Indian flights across the board. Over 100 have been reported in just the last couple of days, resulting in tens of crores in damage to nearly all of India's various airlines. Is this an organized attack? Is there a Canada link? We'll tell you next.
Razr 50 Ultra comes with Google Gemini. Motorola Razr 50 Ultra comes with Google Gemini.
Hi, I am AI anchor Sana, bringing the top headlines for you, presented by Motorola. India and China reach agreement on border patrolling along LAC ahead of BRICS Summit. Setback for Arvind Kejriwal, Supreme Court dismisses plea over remarks on PM Modi's degree. IPS officer Ajay Kumar Singh appointed as new DGP of Jharkhand, approved by Election Commission.
Results day humiliation for our rivals. India today smashes viewership charts. Unfake, unfuzzy, unfixed viewership. Zero landing equals viewership domination. Others bark, our viewership has bite. India's true #1 channel.
खतरनाक आवाज थी, बिल्कुल इतनी तेज कभी शायद सुनी नहीं कभी लाइफ में। सिलेंडर भी फटता है तो शायद मेरे ख्याल से इतनी तेज आवाज नहीं आती होगी जितनी इसकी आई। 10 मिनट तक कम से कम रहा। जो मेरे ख्याल से वीडियो भी आई है इसकी सीसीटीवी वीडियो, उसमें भी धुएं का गुबार है। कम से कम नहीं तो 10 से 15 मिनट रहा है। जैसे ही हम आए हैं यहाँ पे, पूरी गली हम आए हैं यहाँ पे, उठ के सब आए हैं यहाँ पे और देखा यहाँ पे तो पूरा धुआं। और एक गाड़ी खड़ी थी यहाँ पे i10 ग्रैंड, उसकी शीशे टूटे हुए थे।
मेरे को तो सुबह सुबह पता लगा कि मेरे बच्चे स्कूल यहाँ पे खेल रहे थे सुबह बच्चों के साथ, तो उनके दोस्तों ने यहाँ पे धमाका सुना तो उन्होंने बताया कि भाई पापा ऐसे ऐसे वहाँ पे धमाका हो गया। हम देख के आए तो ये बोर्ड वगैरह टूट गए हैं और गाड़ियों के शीशे टूट गए। तो मुझे जब पता लगा, और रात को भी सुबह अखबार में मैंने सुबह सुबह पढ़ा कि यहाँ पे डकैती भी हुई है।
Tensions between India and Canada are escalating. Amid the ongoing diplomatic standoff over the killing of Khalistani terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar, where Trudeau government is targeting top Indian diplomats, India added Sandeep Singh Sidhu, a Canadian Border Service Agency official, to its list of fugitive terrorists seeking his deportation. Despite his position in Canada's government, Sidhu has been linked to pro-Khalistan terrorist networks. He's accused of playing a key role in the assassination of Shaurya Chakra awardee Balwinder Singh Sandhu, a hero of Punjab who stood against Khalistan terrorists during Punjab's violent period. The terror connections reportedly extend to Pakistan-based Khalistani leader Lakhbir Singh Road and ISI operatives. With charges of cross-border smuggling of narcotics and weapons, India has raised serious questions about how a Trudeau government official could be playing a terror kingpin's role. Despite serious allegations, Canada appears to be protecting individuals connected to extremist groups. Canada's Foreign Minister Melanie Joly went on to put Indian diplomats on notice. This comes after Canada Prime Minister Justin Trudeau accused India of targeting 6 separatists, further straining ties. Is Trudeau actively facilitating anti-India terror using Khalistani elements? Bureau Report, India Today.
Air quality today. In Delhi, 365. In Mumbai, 70. In Kolkata, 191. In Bangalore, 54. In Chennai, 92. In Hyderabad, 30.
India has a real problem with bomb hoaxes crippling airlines. Over 100 have happened in just the last few days, leading to tens of crores in damages to virtually every Indian airline that currently ferries passengers from one place to the other. Is this an organized attempt to harm India's civil aviation industry, to damage the economy? Is there a Canada link to what's going on? Well, Civil Aviation Minister K. Ram Mohan Naidu today announced that the government is planning to amend laws to address the growing number of bomb hoaxes targeting our airlines. Take a look.
Over 125 bomb threats in 1 week. Hoax calls plague Indian airlines. The Union Civil Aviation Ministry is cracking the whip as fake threats impact flights from the country. The government says perpetrators of hoax bomb threats will be put on a no-fly list. Making such threats will soon be treated as a cognizable offence. The government is also considering amendments to the airline safety laws.
We are trying to make an amendment. Our legal team has worked very thoroughly on this, and we are coming up with an amendment, and then we are taking in, because this has to be a legal change in the Act, we need a consultation from other stakeholders, other ministries also. So we are in that process right now. But we are definitely pushing forward to bring a change in the Suwaska Act also, so that it addresses for these kind of offences which happen when the flight is on ground, so that we can take strict action on them, we can make it cognizable offence. While we are trying to efficiently tackle this situation through the threats we are receiving, we are also not compromising on the safety and security. This also I want to make it a very priority point, because you might feel that there are these threats happening, but we can't even though there are hoax threats, we can't take the situation non-seriously. Everything is important for us. Now the life of a passenger is important, the security situation is important, so the protocol is important for us. So we have enhanced the security also.
Over 125 flights have received hoax bomb threats in the last 1 week. Bomb threat assessment teams have been deployed at all airports in India. Sources say that around 90% threats came from abroad, while 10% of the calls were made from India. The Union Home Ministry's Cyber Wing, CERT-IN, is keeping a close eye on the bomb threats. Calls made using virtual private network and IP addresses are being probed. A user on social media website X was booked for claiming there is a bomb threat to Lucknow-Dammam flight last week. Multiple Indigo flights received bomb threats on Sunday. An account on X claimed that 12 bombers were on 6 Indigo planes that received the bomb threats. Airport authorities are on alert. Bureau Report, India Today.
Jammu and Kashmir's new Chief Minister has reacted to the first terror attack since he took over as the new CM of Jammu and Kashmir. Omar Abdullah says violence against innocents is not justified. The death toll, remember, has gone up to 7. Here's what Chief Minister Omar has just said.
हमले की जितनी निंदा की जाए, जितना इसके खिलाफ बोला जाए कम है. बेगुनाहों के खिलाफ इस तरह तशद्दुद का इस्तेमाल ये कहाँ से जायज़ है. अगर हमारे सिक्योरिटी ग्रिड में कहीं गैप्स हैं, कहीं खामियां हैं, कहीं कमज़ोरियां हैं, उनको दुरुस्त किया जाएगा. वेस्टेड इंटरेस्ट ने कभी ये नहीं चाहा कि यहाँ नॉर्मल सी हो, यहाँ हालात ठीक हों. लेकिन इन्हीं वेस्टेड इंटरेस्ट्स को तो हमने पहले भी शिकस्त दी, आगे भी इनको हम नाकामयाब करेंगे.
And coming up after this very short break, if you live in Andhra Pradesh or Tamil Nadu and are planning to have more than 2 children, you could be eligible for some very, very lucrative government benefits. That is going to become state policy because of the aging population. That's what Chandrababu Naidu and MK Stalin feel for Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu. Akshita is going to break down that story for you on the other side.